Hi folks, my name is Brian Benz. I'm here to show you part 2 of how to deploy JBoss EAP on Azure RedHat OpenShift using the Azure portal. We're going to be deploying an application on top of the RedHat OpenShift cluster that we created. Please check out the part 1 video for more details on that. And also follow along at aka.ms/JBossEAP on ARO to see all of the details of the things I'm going to show you today. All right, so just a brief recap. What we did is we went through the quick start. We used the Azure Marketplace offering to create the RedHat OpenShift cluster. When we were done, we had an Azure portal that looked something like this with an installed cluster, a virtual network, and some other supporting items that connect to Azure services and help with deployment. And then we verified the installation by going into the admin console and making sure that the JBoss EAP operator is installed and ready to go. The installation succeeded and was up to date, and everything looks good. All right, so in this part, we're going to deploy an application on top of this RedHat OpenShift cluster. Go back to the quick start and let's go down to the part where we start deploying applications. In the quick start, you'll see the step for setting up the Azure database for MySQL. What we're going to do is we're actually going to create a simple CRUD application that accesses MySQL. In this case, it's Azure Database for MySQL, a service that runs on top of Azure. Once that's done, we're going to connect our application to our cluster using a deployment of an application that I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so the first thing is we have to satisfy some prerequisites for environment variables that we're going to use. Some of these were covered in actually all of these were covered in part 1. In order to execute this part, you're going to need a terminal, and the terminal is going to have to be running Azure CLI. You can run Azure CLI on Windows, Mac, or Linux on your local machine. You can use Cloud Shell. You can use Visual Studio Code as well. In this case, we're going to use the simplest form of the Cloud Shell, which is you go into the portal. You can go to shell.azure.com, or you can just click this little button up here in the Azure portal. So let's say you're in here in your installation. Click the little icon, and you're going to see a login. This is using your Azure subscription to connect to a container. And this already has everything you need installed for this. Because we're installing MySQL and we're going to execute some MySQL commands as well, you're going to have to, you can either use the Cloud Shell, which already has MySQL pre-installed, or you can use MySQL Shell or MySQL Workbench if you have those installed as well. Next, you're going to have to go through all of these environment variables and define values for each one of them. Some of them should stay the way they are. The ones with the brackets here should have a customized value put into them. And the explanation of all of these is just under that section in the setup database for MySQL flexible server part of the quick start at aka.ms/JBossEAP on ARO. From here, I can copy this command, which uses the environment variables that I already set up. I could go into my Cloud Shell, paste it in using Control-Shift-V, hit enter, and it's going to create the MySQL instance that I need for my service. This takes a little bit of time, so through the magic of recording technology, it'll only look like a moment, but actually, yeah, it takes a few minutes or more. And there it is, we're back. So once the MySQL instance is installed, let's go back to the quick start. You'll get a response like this. It's a JSON document, and you can save this for your records later, but you don't actually need any details in here. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to define a DB host environment variable based on that MySQL setting, and we're going to use this when we do our deployment to the RedHat OpenShift cluster. So let's copy that, paste it into the shell, Control-Shift-V once again. And there's your environment variable set up for the host. We're going to do something that's not great. For those of you who are DBAs out there, please brace yourself. We're going to open up all of the IP addresses in the world to access our MySQL database. You're going to do this briefly while you set some privileges for the database that you created. And then we're going to close down this rule right away. So copy this, paste it into the Cloud Shell. This does take a minute or two as well. When that's done, you get another JSON response. You don't need any information in there. The next thing we're going to do is execute a MySQL command. This MySQL command is going to set up some privileges for the database so that the OpenShift instance can access it via password. So once again, do this really quickly. Okay, so it tells you using a password on the command line interface can be insecure. We're doing all kinds of bad things here. It's a demo application, so it should be okay. But this is, by the way, where you need to have MySQL installed if you're not using the Cloud Shell to execute this command. Then really quickly, let's go back to our quick start and let's delete that terrible firewall rule and resecure our MySQL instance. Once again, it's going to take a minute or two. Our server is now again secure. So we've set up the MySQL completely. So the next thing I'm going to show you is deployment of the actual application. We're going to start by cloning a repo that we already have out there. So let's put that into our Cloud Shell. This takes a second or two. Interestingly, if you're using the Cloud Shell, it will save this in your Cloud Shell for future use. It uses Azure Storage to do that. All right, back up to the quick start. We're going to create a new project, and we already named the project in our environment variables. This uses the OpenShift command. As part of part 1 of this video, I show you how to set that up. You can either refer to the part 1 of the video or aka.ms/JBossEAP on ARO. All right, so now we are logged in and we've created a new project. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to copy some values. These values are going to be used to create a secret. It's a Kubernetes secret inside of the RedHat OpenShift cluster. So copy these, paste them in, and that'll set both variables for us. Next, we're going to create that Kubernetes secret using this YAML. And that's the message we're looking for. Pull secret created. Next up, we define a couple of other links to link to those secrets. All right. Now, we're going to pull an image stream. And that consists of applying some values, creating a new build in OpenShift, and then starting that build. This will actually take a little while as well. Once again, we're going to use the OpenShift CLI to create a secret. This is the secret that you defined in your environment variables, and it's going to create it inside of Kubernetes for us. All right, the secret's created. Next up, we're actually going to do the deployment. So the deployment itself is right here. It's a YAML file. Those of you who are familiar with Kubernetes will be recognizing this. It's very similar. We're going to paste that into our shell and execute it. Okay, so the Wildfly server, Wildfly or Java EE Cafe application is created. Now we can do OC get pods to actually see the pods. Image pull back off is not a bad thing. It's just actually creating the container, and those will disappear in a second. But what we're looking for is when it says 1 of 1 for all 3 of the Java Cafe 0, 1, and 2, then we're ready to actually test out the application. There is a command here that you can use to watch for that. You can just continually hit get pods. And by the way, if you use Kubernetes kubectl, it's the same command. You can get logs of Kubernetes as well, using the same command you use for Kubernetes. In this case, let's watch for the pods. And when it shows 1 of 1 for all 3 of these running, which will be here, then you'll see the details that we're looking for. Right now, only one of one is running. Java Cafe 2 won the race, and we'll see what happens with the others. All right, now we've got 2 running, just waiting for one more. And there's number 3. Great. So we're ready to actually check the application now. Let's go back to the quick start. There's a command you can use here to get the URL that you need. So to get out of this, Control-C, paste in the command, and you're going to get a URI or URL that you can use to view the application. You open this in a new browser window. Let's just do it here. You'll see application is not available. This is a good tip because it's not supporting secure server. You need to actually change HTTPS to HTTP. And as you can see here, now we have an application. It's a CRUD application. You can create, let's do $10 lattes. You can read, you can update, and you can delete. All right, so that in a nutshell is deploying the app. As I mentioned before, this is part 2 of our 2-part series of deploying a JBoss EAP on Azure RedHat OpenShift using the Azure portal. Thanks for joining. Once again, all the information, aka.ms/JBoss EAP on ARO.